have been dreaming about going on vacation for at least 360 days. The kids are now out of school. You've got your week scheduled out, at least your week scheduled out on the calendar at work, and you are going to take your family on a vacation. It may be to somewhere that you used to vacation to as a child. Say you want to go camping, or maybe you're going to a resort in Hawaii, or just places like that. And the idea is to go on a peaceful retreat, and just enjoy yourself, maybe disconnect from society for a little while, get your thoughts together, recharge, and then rejoin the rest of us here in the world and feel better until next year. This being Frightmares, that is not going to be the case. We rarely have happily ever afters here. And tonight's story is more like a phenomenon, the missing 411 phenomenon. I'm going to be talking about the phenomenon itself, but in order to do so, I'm kind of going to highlight a couple of the missing 411 cases. These cases, you guys, they are just crazy. You could definitely go down a rabbit hole with these. And, I'm going to put this out there as a paranormal public service announcement, because I really think that it's something that more people need to know about. If you've never heard of it before, you might want to take some extra measures on your vacation this year. I don't go into the woods anymore, not deep anyway, not deep into the wilderness. And if I did, there are definitely a couple of things that I would do that I don't think I would have thought about doing before. So in this episode of Frightmares, we are going to be discussing the phenomenon known as the missing 411 phenomenon. And this is a really creepy one, you guys. Cheers. Alrighty guys, so the missing 411 phenomena was, I think, first brought into everybody's sphere of knowledge by a man that goes by the name of David Paulides. He is a retired police detective from California. He spent 20 plus years in various aspects of law enforcement. He did work missing person cases. I know that he had something to do with the Kristen Smart case. And Dave, he's just a very down-to-earth man. He has, 5 or 6 missing 411 books written now. I will have them listed in the description box down below, where you can go to his website to get them, as well as some more information on the topic. And it's really interesting, you guys. Dave was actually staying at a national park when he was approached by 2 forest rangers that were familiar with what he did. And they entrusted him with a little bit of knowledge that they probably weren't supposed to be talking about. But it was about some missing person cases that they had at some of the parks they had worked at. They'd been doing this for a while. And these people went missing under very strange circumstances. The national parks have no lists of missing people that go missing at their parks. And they said that, the parks would pour a lot of resources into these cases in the beginning. And then as, public interest kind of wore down over time, they pulled funding and they just never talked about it again. Dave contacted his team and kind of asked them about it, to check into it and see if there was any fire there. And yes, there was. So Dave put a criteria down on the cases that he wanted to get into and put resources and time into solving. And these were the truly baffling cases, the unexplainable ones. And the criteria that he began to use in the beginning for figuring out what cases he wanted to research was, first of all, there had to have been a completed search and rescue operation where they ruled out any kind of criminal activity at all. The person could not have gone voluntarily missing, meaning they could not have just walked out of their life and stepped into another one, or chose to opt out of life. So they had to be mentally sound. They also, the search dogs, this was a strange thing that he began to see, and so he added this down to his criteria list. Anytime search and rescue dogs were brought in and they refused to track, he added that to the list of criteria that he would take a case on, as well as they had to rule out animal attacks. If you've ever seen an animal attack or been the victim of an animal attack, you know that generally predators are not looking to hide what they're doing. Either it's a territory dispute and they think that, you know, you're invading their space, or your food. So, you know if there's been an animal attack, and so there couldn't be one of those. And I guess that's it. Dave, when he started finding this, because like I said, there were no lists that the parks kept, they said that they relied on the memory of their employees. We all know that's pretty reliable, right? He began to notice that these things happened in clusters, he called them. The largest area for these cluster missing people cases here in the U.S. is Yosemite National Park. And I'll insert a map here because it's kind of odd. And the reason he calls these clusters of missing people is because it's strange. Oftentimes these people will go missing, and you can have one case where someone vanishes one week. The next week, somebody else will vanish, kind of under the same circumstances, and neither person are found. It's very odd. Also, after researching hundreds of cases, Dave kind of figured out things that were similar in each case, and it's really odd things that you wouldn't think of, and I mean, you probably wouldn't even tie them together were you not looking at hundreds or thousands of these cases. And when I tell you it's kind of odd things, it's really odd things. Like I said, the hunting dogs would refuse to track, or, you know, they'd go in a circle and just sit down or something really strange like that. Almost all cases took place near water, a water source, whether that's a trickling stream or a massive lake. There's generally a water source nearby, or a boulder field, geological boulder fields like granite fields they talk about a lot. Also, during the time that the person goes missing, generally in the first day or two that the person goes missing, there is a significant weather event that takes place. We're talking a blizzard that dumps 3 or 4 feet of snow within 24 to 48 hours, or a torrential thunderstorm, heavy winds, rain. They hamper the search and rescue efforts, and generally, if there is any evidence to find, you know, this washes it away, excuse me, or covers it up. The person, more often than not, is of German heritage, of German descent, ancestry, which is odd, but, you know, it's there in black and white. Also, a lot of the times, a person will have an unknown, or I won't say unknown, I'll say undocumented, physical or mental ailment that happens at the time that people may or may not know about. It could be undisclosed. And I'm not going to say it's, as far as a mental, we won't say a mental illness, but there's one child that went missing that was on the spectrum. That was really odd. I'll touch on that a little bit since I brought it up, but he was on the spectrum. So we're talking about little things like that. Or a person that is a diabetic, you know, just things like that. Um, and the first case that I want to talk to you about is just so odd to me, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, as I try to remind you guys in a lot of these, we have to keep in mind and be sensitive to the fact that although you're hearing this from me and we're getting into it mainly for the educational aspect of it, I will say, I'm sure it's for entertainment value, but I look into these things because I want to know more. There's a curiosity there. But yeah, we have to be sensitive to the fact that these happen to real people, even in our ghost cases and things like that, or our alien abduction cases, or what have you, that we're going to get into. You have to keep in mind that, I guess, real is subjective, but the people that are relaying these experiences to you absolutely believe that they experienced these things and that they've happened. So we're going to talk about the missing 411 phenomena, and I'm going to touch on these cases. They are very complex, but I'm just going to hit the oddities of them, what makes them a 411 case. The first case I want to talk to you about is about a missing 3-year-old in Colorado, sweet Jared Adadero. He went missing in 1999. His father and his 6-year-old sister Jocelyn. His dad owned a resort. I believe it was called the Podre River Resort, and it was in the Comanche Wilderness in northern Colorado. Alan and his twin brother kind of co-opted the resort, and they were up there getting it ready to open for winter. Alan was a single father. He was recently divorced, and he was caring for the kids on his own. He had just recently joined a Christian singles network group, and they had come to an agreement that the group would kind of exchange work in helping him getting the place open for the winter for lodging and accommodations, you know, for free. And Alan needed the help, so they had no problem with that. And on one of their days off, the group, which consisted of 11 adults, decided that they wanted to visit one of the fish hatcheries that was 2 miles away from the resort. And Jocelyn wanted to go. They had no problem in taking her, so they did. Or they asked. They asked Alan if they could take her, and he said sure. Jared, hearing this, kind of isn't happy. He wants to go too. And Alan, he isn't real sure about that because Jared's 3, right? After Jared begs and begs and begs, Alan decides, okay, it's 2 miles away. There are 11 adults. I trust these people. They'll keep an eye on my son. And so Jared kind of gets his way. And Alan lets him go. The weird thing about this is, in between the resort and the fish hatchery that was 2 miles away, the adults change their mind and they decide that they want to go for a hike. And the place that they want to go on a hike is called the Big South Trailhead. And it is a very rugged trail. It is not for a beginner hiker, a beginner adult hiker, much less 2 little kids, you know. So taking these kids was it was kind of odd to begin with. And it was 15 miles away. And it was a hell of a lot more hazardous than a field trip to the fish hatcheries. And for whatever reason, nobody bothered calling and asking Alan, hey, can we take your kids on this hazardous hiking trail? You know, we'll keep an eye on them. But we just wanted to let you know that we're not going to the fish hatchery, you know. Nobody thought to do that. So Alan is thinking his kids are at a hatchery. They get to the trailhead, and about a mile into it, around noon, is the last time the group remembers seeing Jared. There was one group that went faster. They broke into 2 groups. The first group was kind of going at a faster pace. The second group was at a slower pace, and they had the children. Around noon, there were two fishermen that were on the riverbank there, and they were approached by Jared, who had asked if they had seen any bears, and the fishermen told him no. They really didn't think it was odd seeing Jared because they saw the group right behind him. He was in eyesight of the group. So they assumed that Jared was with them, and so they weren't alarmed in any way, shape, or form, and they said that he just kind of skipped off. And this was at noon. Keep that in mind. At 12:15, the groups heard a scream. They describe it as a scream from a child that was playing and having fun. It didn't sound like a scream of pain or terror or anything like that. But that was when they noticed that Jared was no longer with the group. That was 15 minutes after the fishermen had seen Jared. So as soon as they realized that Jared wasn't there, they kind of searched for him. They look around because how far can a 3-year-old, keep in mind guys, this kid's 3, this trail is kind of hazardous. It's very steep. We're talking rocky area, and he's 3. But they didn't find him. You have these two groups that are looking for this little 3-year-old, and they spend an hour looking and no sign of Jared. So they call Alan, and the weird thing is when they call Alan, they tell him, hey Alan, Jared is okay, but we just wanted to let you know that we can't find him. Well, the first question out of his mouth is, well, how can he go missing at a hatchery? Then they tell him, we're not at the hatchery. We decided to da-da-da-da. And Alan's pissed. I would be too. Not only is he pissed at the adults for not adulting, but he's also confused and scared. I mean, my son hid behind the hedges of our home at our front door, and I lost sight of him for like 6 or 7 minutes, and my heart dropped to my toes. I mean, it's just, if any parents have ever experienced that, even for a moment, it's the worst feeling in the world. Alan gets there. He's like, Jared's 3. He's not, he can't really climb mountains or anything. So he knows his son's limitations. They look and look and look, and there's no sign of Jared. He finally contacts law enforcement, and by 6:30 that night, there were 65 experienced search and rescue team members there that were looking for Jared, and they found nothing. By dawn, they had divers that were searching the river because, of course, that would be their first thought, and they found no sign of Jared in the river. There was also a helicopter that had been deployed, and the helicopter crashed, you guys. Nobody was killed, but 2 of the crew were seriously injured, and that kind of put a damper on it. And so anyway, long story short, there's no sign of Jared, none at all, and Alan's just heartbroken. He's just destroyed. Fast forward to June of 2003. There are 2 male hikers. They're very experienced hikers, and they're on the same trail. They're walking in a boulder field, and they find a little boy's tennis shoe, a little boy's shoe. A couple of yards away, they find a little boy's jacket and a pair of pants and the other shoe. I'll insert pictures, but the clothing is really, as you can see, worn and not in very good shape at all. The pants were found inside out, but the shoes were new. They were brand new looking, right? And these shoes have been out in the weather, the elements, for 4 years, and they look like that. It's just really odd. 5 search and rescue people were called in. They sent a picture of the clothing items to Alan, who identified them as being Jared's clothing. So of course they spread out and see if they can find anything else. 500 feet up, vertically up in elevation, they find one child's molar that was just laying on a log. The sun hits it and they see it. It was the same with the top of Jared's skull. And those were the only things that they found. That's the only tangible thing that Alan has of Jared. And, of course, at that point in time, they didn't think that it was a kidnapping. What they thought was it was a mountain lion. Apparently, mountain lions are very capable of attacking silently. In some cases, victims they don't have a chance to scream. Survivors have told of that. And so that was the prevailing theory of what happened to Jared. However, when his clothing items and everything were tested by the CBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, there was no big cat DNA. There was no animal DNA, no hair, nothing like that found, on any of the items that belonged to Jared. There was no blood, Jared's or predators and animals on any of the items. And when big cat experts were contacted and asked about it, they said that generally when you have a large cat and it is attacking you, the first thing that it's going to go for is going to be your soft midsection, which is the stomach. They said that Jared's clothing showed no sign of an animal attack. If it were a mountain lion or a bear or anything like that, the clothing would have been ripped to shreds. And as you can see, it's not in the best shape, but once it was examined, it was said to have been damage caused by rodents and birds that were using the material for their nests or for their dens or what have you. And that's it. As far as little Jared goes, case closed. Alan doesn't have any answers. That's it. Will he ever? I don't know. There's another case from upstate New York that happened to an experienced hunter called Tom. He goes by the name of Thomas Messick. This is a case from Missing 411, The Hunted. Mr. Messick was a firearms expert. He was a very experienced hunter. He taught other people how to hunt. He taught other people survival skills. I mean, this was a very capable man when it came to handling himself in the wilderness and knowing what to do. In little Jared's case, it was just Jared. He had nothing to defend himself from whatever happened. But in Tom's case, that's not necessarily true. Tom, as well as his son and several other adult men, went on a hunting trip in upstate New York. And Tom, he had suffered an accident that left him blind in one of his eyes and deaf, and he had bad knees. And, he was up in years. He was in his 70s. And probably 4 of these men were in their 70s or they were older. And so the idea of this hunting trip, like they did every single year at this location, they were very familiar with this terrain, with this specific location. And so what they would do was I think they said 100 yards, they would walk 100 feet or so into the forest off of the road, and they would sit by a tree. Now, these were the elderly gentlemen. And they did that, right? Every 100 yards, they put one. Mr. Messick happened to be at the end of the line. He was closest to a water source, I believe, and this was on federal land. I believe it was public land. And the idea was the younger men would go up and they would push the deer down towards the older hunters, and the older hunters would be able to bag their deer, because they weren't, they weren't agile. They weren't able to get up and around. So they did that. The weird thing was they really didn't see any animals that day, the younger guys. When they went back down to round everybody up, they found everybody sitting by their tree and everything except for Mr. Messick. He was gone. I don't really have a time frame for that, but his wife and everybody, remember, this is a very experienced hunter. He is a very experienced woodsman when it comes to surviving out there, as well as firearm safety and things like that. He had a weapon with him, and he was gone. He could not have gone far. As we know, he was elderly. He had really bad knees. That was why he had to sit and wait for the guys to push the deer towards him anyway. But there was no sign. There was no rifle. There was nothing. There was no sign of his backpack and no sign of Mr. Messick. He was just gone. After a very large search in which you had law enforcement, just tons and tons, hundreds of people looking for Mr. Messick, they found nothing. They found no rifle. They found no spent ammo. They found nothing of Mr. Messick. One of the gentlemen that was closest to him, that was also sitting by the tree, that he had been friends with for years and years, kind of described to law enforcement, he heard a noise. He describes it as a metal clank, almost like a bear trap closing. But he'd never heard it before. He said he's never heard it since, but that was the only thing that was out of place that day. And like we said, they had kind of thought that maybe Mr. Messick had been hit in the road or something by a passerby, but they found no evidence of that. And that's just another very strange disappearance. I did say that I would talk about a little bit about Sammy Belkey. He went missing at Crater Lake National Park. He and his father were walking on the side of a road. Crater Lake, if you guys have ever been there, it's just unimaginable. It's beautiful. It's unbelievably beautiful. Sorry. Like something out of Avatar. The water is just crystal clear. And that they were walking by one of the view sites. One side, it was a beautiful view of Crater Lake. And on the other side, it was almost a vertical cliff face. As Sammy and his father were walking, there was a cyclist that was coming towards them. Now, if you remember, I told you that Sammy was on the spectrum, and for whatever reason, Sammy picked up a rock and he was going to throw it at the cyclist. The cyclist kind of admonished him, hey, don't throw the rock. We don't throw rocks. And Sammy got embarrassed. He threw the rock down and he ran up this cliff, this big hill, this very steep hill. And he kind of disappears over the top. Keep in mind, his father is right there. His father is shouting for him, Sammy, 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 and immediately takes off and runs up after his son. When he gets to the top, there's no Sammy to be seen. And no Sammy has ever been found. Nothing of Sammy has ever been found. Those are a couple of the cases. I don't want this to be too long, and I wanted to highlight the cases so I can tell you about this phenomenon. Those are odd. There are other cases that you can get into, cases of missing hunters and things like that. And the odd thing is, these people will be found in areas that have already been searched. Sometimes a number of times. There's one case in particular, and I didn't want to highlight it because I couldn't remember the name, but I remember the gist of it and how it was very odd. And it was a man that was preparing to get ready for hunting season, and he was actually going out early in the morning on his ATV and kind of scouting out things. Long story short, he fails to come home when he said that he would. Wife gets very concerned, calls in law enforcement. They find his ATV. They see that all of his clothing has been neatly folded and set on the seat of this ATV, but the man is missing. He's not there. A massive search takes place and they find nothing. Weeks later, they find this man over a fallen tree on a path that search and rescue took every single day when they were going into the area to look for this man. Why wouldn't they have seen him? He's right there. They could not tell what he died from. He was kind of cut up a little bit, scraped, bruised. I think he had some broken bones. But now they did make the comment that it looked like he had just been dropped. That he was in an airplane or a helicopter, and they just kind of dropped him, and he just kind of hit every tree branch on the way down. Is how they described it. The injuries to his body and things like that. But how odd is that? Search and rescue, they do their due diligence, for these things. And it's very strange. So what Dave suggests is, number one, if you're planning on going on a hike, please don't go by yourself. And even when you take someone with you, please have a plan and give that to somebody that you trust, i.e. the time that you're going in, when you expect to come out, the area that you're going to be in, and stay in that area. Do not deviate from the plan. If you are not out within a certain time frame, send help. If you're going in on your own, he recommends taking something to defend yourself, whether that is bear spray or a firearm or anything that you're comfortable with using, as well as what's called a personal locator beacon. This is a thing that you keep on you, and it sends a signal to a satellite that pings your location and can tell people exactly where you are. It's your personal GPS, right? So he advises taking that with you. He also advises taking a couple of extra supplies with you, extra water, extra food, things like that, because you never know, just in case. And yeah, you guys, that's it. It's just a very weird phenomenon. A lot of odd cases, a lot of strange things. I definitely recommend reading Dave's books, watching Dave's film. He just recently put one out about a UFO connection, and I've watched hundreds of UFO documentaries. I've never seen one that was like this. It's a really good one. I'll link it to you guys on where you can go watch it if you choose to. But yeah, please do yourselves a favor. Please become familiar with this. I'm not being cheeky when I call it a paranormal public service announcement, because it is, right? It's odd. There is, in his book, Missing 411 The Hunted, there's a famous optical physicist, Bruce Maccabee, and his wife is a hunter. And she was in a deer stand one day, and it was the afternoon. She has her BlackBerry cell phone with her, and she said all of a sudden the woods just got eerily quiet. There was nothing. There was no bird song. There was no insect noises. There was nothing. And she said it just felt different. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw something, and it was moving through the trees. It was 25 feet off of the forest floor, and she said it was moving. What she describes it as is almost like the Predator float in the Predator movie. She describes it as a mirage. You know how when you're looking at a hot road, and you see that distortion, or the heat's rising off the top of it. She describes it as that, wrapped in like cling film. She said it was almost transparent, but it wasn't. And she took a picture of it, which is in Dave's book, Missing 411, The Hunted. I'll list it in the description box down below. And it's very odd. The picture itself, you really don't see anything, but the odd thing is, her husband, like I said, Bruce Maccabee, is a famous optical physicist, and he took the data from this phone, and he's looking at it, and the resolution that this phone is capable of taking, the picture that she took of this thing, now she took a picture before, she took a picture after, they're fine. But the one that has this distortion in it, the resolution that's on this particular photo in the metadata, the phone is not capable of taking. So that was really weird. And that's really the only thing, the only person that we have that has seen anything that could possibly maybe be some sort of thing. Everybody has their theories, right? Some say it's Bigfoot. Some say it's mutant hillbillies that live in the mountains of Appalachia, feral people, they call them. And we all know there are people that have forsaken society, and they do live back up in the middle of the woods. There was a television show that showcased a man called Mick Dodge. I don't know exactly how much of that was true, but there are people that are survivalists, and they live in these woods. And it's just, I don't know. It could be these feral people, like in Long Term. It could be that these people are being abducted by these UFOs. It could be that these people, Dave did a special for, I want to say, the History Channel called Vanished. I'll link it in the description box down below. And scientifically speaking, they found some really weird time anomalies on that show that was just odd. So some people think that maybe people are walking into a tear in the fabric of space and time that stays open just for a split second, and they're no longer here, but they are there, just strange. So do yourself a favor and look into it. You never know. It might save you from whatever this thing is, because it's like Dave says, the people that it targets, it's batting 100%. So it's just odd. But that's it, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's case. I took a break last week. Like I said, sometimes you have to step away, and that's what I did. And it's okay if you have to do that. So, yeah. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Next week's case is going to be interesting. And I'm not really sure. I'm kind of wavering between two cases. I don't know if I want to do a creature feature because we really haven't done that yet, or if I want to stick with an old reliable and do a very famous haunting case. So we'll see. I'm not sure, but regardless, we'll have some fun, and I look forward to seeing you guys then. Until then, say your prayers, send out good vibes, and always try to stay in the light. Talk to you guys later. Bye, y'all.